Alright, I haven't seen you guys in a long time, so we are back with the model of the desk fan that you can see here. So we're gonna work on it in detail, and I'm gonna show you every step of the process and some intricate details we're gonna work here on, which is gonna make us able to, or is gonna allow us to create the model that you can see here. So please like this video if you do, and subscribe to our channel if you're new, and please share these tutorials so other people can benefit as well. So without further ado, see you on the other side. Alright, so it is time to create a desk fan. As you can see here, it's gonna be a good experience here, and we're gonna learn some things about modeling, and we're gonna go a little bit in depth, and we're gonna use some different techniques. So as you can see here, we're starting here with a cylinder, and we're gonna convert it to poly, and of course we are gonna remove this top polygon, as you can see here. And knowing that this is gonna be the base of this desk fan, we're gonna use, of course, the technique which is gonna be gonna allow us to extrude the edges, which is to keep holding shift. Of course, we're gonna add some edges here to add some smoothness, and we can also chamfer it if we want to, because there is possibility that we might want to add more smoothness to help the supporting, or to help the smoothing modifier to understand what we are doing here, and to get things a little bit more smoother. Of course, changing the material is a good idea in the beginning to allow us to differentiate between the lines and or the edges and the actual surface. And of course, here we're gonna add some specular and glossiness effects to make the model look a little bit more prettier. Of course, here I'm looking at a reference image that is helping me actually to create what we are seeing here, and keep holding shift to extrude the edges, and we have talked about this about several million times before. So this is a no-brainer if you are used to watching my tutorials. Of course, we are gonna keep adding some little nuances here and there, and of course, as you can see here, using the chamfer modifier is a good idea to give smoothness to hard edges and hard corners. And here we're gonna extrude or inset a little bit, and extrude after that inward to create that empty space that is gonna allow us to attach to it another piece. And we're gonna create this other piece, of course, holding shift and moving that polygon to create a copy of it, of course, and detach the as we've seen, to detach the that surface. And we're gonna convert it to poly after adding the shadow modifier. I hope these processes are not a little bit too fast for you here, because I assume that you know the basics. I assume that you know the basic modifiers of 3ds Max. So I think that you're not gonna have any problem following this if you are actually a person who is used to creating some simple objects and simple models in 3ds Max. Of course, now there is there are gonna be some small details that we are gonna add here. For example, we want to see the difference between these two pieces, and we want to be able to see one inside the other. Of course, we're gonna change, as you can see here, changing the view that we're gonna use to create a cylinder that is gonna be the starting point of creating kind of the base, or the where the engine of the desk fan is gonna be located, which is the most complicated piece by far. And we are not gonna dive deep into creating the little details that we are not gonna see. So we are gonna try to touch on the most obvious pieces that we are gonna see. And we're gonna tweak this piece a little bit, and several times actually. So this is not the actual measurements of the final fan. Of course, here use the edge extrusion, keep holding shift to do this. And of course, we're gonna delete this face and apply the edge extrusion technique here as well to create the other kind of hemispherical end of this model. Of course, as I said before, we're gonna tweak this cylinder several times because we are kind of comparing these pieces kind of in proportion to each other. Of course, here we're gonna inset in, and we're gonna keep holding control to select the vertices to convert poly selection to vertex selection, and welding these vertices is a must, of course. Here we are trying to add more smoothness here using the chamfer modifier. Okay, right now we are trying to inset these polys here, and we are trying to create a hole right there. And this is something that is not hard at all to do, but you have got to follow some rules in order to get it right. For example, moving the vertices must be restrained to the surface in order not to move these vertices and try to fix their position later on. Of course, here we're gonna move some of the four of them using the scale tool inside to create some sort of circular shape right there. Okay, this is another thing that we're gonna do here, which is to do actually basically the same process and try to create a circular selection using these vertices, and we're gonna build on top of them to create something similar. Of course, we're gonna do some interesting things here. Probably we could have used some rotation right there in order to kind of make that surface in the center to avoid dealing with alignment issues. Anyways, this is gonna be a starting point for another piece that is gonna be created on top. So creating it from the top viewport is gonna be probably a good idea, and bring that cylinder in the best possible position. And of course we are gonna convert the Urban Poly, and we're gonna start adding some details as usual using the edge extrusion method, keep only shift, move and scale, and use the chamfer to smooth some of the corners. And of course just follow what I am trying to do here, and you're gonna be fine probably. And capping the empty space is a good idea as well. Okay, good. We're probably gonna change the material of this piece here in order for it to fit. Of course, this one is gonna be extruded to the inside because this is what it looks like in the reference image actually. Okay, I think now I'm gonna work on the back end, and let's see what we are gonna be capable of doing here. Of course, this pushing the center to the inside is a nice thing to do, and when smoothed out, it's gonna look a lot more interesting than keeping it as it was before. Of course, here we're gonna try to do the same thing that we have done before. But of course, we're gonna make sure that we are constraining the movement of these vertices to the surface or the faces in order to allow them to move according to the rest of the pieces, or the rest of the vertices, of course. Okay, here we are trying to add some interesting details that are gonna be probably not gonna be seen at all, but they are important. Of course, um, removing that polygon from the surface here sometimes is a good idea and sometimes it is not. So let's hope this time it is a good idea to do this, because the alignment is not gonna be perfectly horizontal, and we've gotta do this ourselves using the scale tool or the alignment tools we have in 3ds Max. And sometimes it is necessary to extract some of these polygons from the original model in order to keep that piece that is going to be getting out or going to be pushed out of the surface that is coming from, in order to keep the right direction that is that it is coming from. And we're gonna use some skill here, because we sometimes need to work on these things manually, and it's gonna be challenging sometimes. We're gonna choose other options, and these options, a lot of them don't work in the cases where we actually need one of them, and only one of them is gonna work properly. And the final thing we want to stress is, whatever tools you use, the most important thing is that when you take a closer look at the final result you created, the better it looks, the better the work you do is the point is, it doesn't matter what tools you use when actually you can create a good result. It doesn't matter the tools you use, and of course, as long as the result is good enough, you are allowed to use whatever you want. It's a simple point, but it was a little bit harder for me to explain to you guys. Okay, now there is going to be time for creating some little bit of interesting pieces here that are going to add more depth and more details. And of course, these pieces and all of these pieces are subject to change as we go. Okay, now we are trying to complete this small little piece that is going to be the starting point for creating an extension that is going to be attached to the piece that is coming out at the bottom of this big cylinder that we have created previously. Okay, we are now trying to support the edges of this little piece here. Okay, this piece here is gonna be a kind of a bridge between these small little pieces. Of course, we're gonna use the edge extrusion method to get to the other end. Applying the symmetry modifier here is going to be a quick way to duplicate the other side. And the challenge right now is to put to the other end where it is supposed to be. So we are probably going to extend this piece or bend it or rotate it, whatever. Alright, we are working here on this small little piece, which is not that big of a deal, but it adds more details to whatever we are trying to do here. Which is actually basically a screw. Of course, adding a shell modifier is going to allow us to get the thickness that we are looking for. Now things are going to be a little bit challenging because we need to be able to connect the two pieces together. So there is going to be some tricks we have to do here. Okay, we're good to go to add some materials and jump to another thing. Alright, now we are gonna create a tube that is gonna allow us to go further and create the one of the main pieces that represent the desk fan and make it what it is. We are going to tweak and adjust some of the parameters that are gonna allow us to match what we see in the reference image, and probably we're gonna play around for a couple minutes until we find a good position for this part of the desk fan. Okay, and the scale is something extremely important because if we make it too slow, too small, it's gonna be off-putting, and if we make it look too big, it's gonna be the same thing as well. So we're gonna try to find a good size for this part. And also making sure everything is centered is something that we should take really seriously because it's extremely important. Okay, this part here, this cylinder is going to represent the actually the center of the disc fan, and usually this is where the logo is presented to customers. We're gonna apply some techniques that we are familiar with to get this piece done. Okay, from the side we can see that this is not something that is hard to do. We can see that there are these lines that we need to create in order to create that effect of these little pieces of metal that are circling around the tube that we created previously. And of course this line is going to be a starting point, so we're going to make sure that this line is going to be centered or its pivot is going to be aligned to the pivot of the tube in order to create an array of it's going to be rotated around in order to create that effect. And of course the thickness is going to be activated using the enable render in viewport and enable render in render if you are going to do a rendering for your model. Of course, let's use an array. Let's try for a couple times until we get it right. Alright, this is the wrong axis. Okay, there are some problems here, and we're gonna try to figure this out quickly. As you can see here, this worked. All right, so let's copy this and invert the direction to the other side. And of course, there might be something that we need to work on, because the front side actually does not look exactly like the back side of the but we're gonna figure it out. So we're gonna delete those for now, and we're gonna change the look of this one, this guy right here, convert it to poly, and start modifying or moving some of the its original vertices. Make it a little bit more smoother and a little bit more rounder. We're gonna chamfer these quickly. Okay, now as you can see here, the desk fan is starting to take the shape or the look that we are hoping to see in the final result. Right now we are going to use a circle to create the second layer of these metal pieces. And actually there are better ways to do this, but doing it manually is not gonna hurt as much as you think. There is a downside to doing this, because scaling is a little bit difficult to deal with. And the problem with using that previous technique of copying and using the scale is that the more copies you create, the smaller these circles become, and the thickness actually of these cylindrical circles is gonna be difficult to work with. And this is definitely something that we don't want to see. But as a start, we can uh, just find a way in order for this desk fan to look as good as if we are making everything perfect as it should be. So now we are trying to move these pieces in their original place according to the 8 pieces of metal that set the boundaries of this cage. All right, keep doing this until you get to the final place, or the final piece. And of course, I'm not gonna use all of them, so we are probably gonna delete some of these, of course. Okay, now the rest of the pieces that are gonna be that we created, they are not necessary, not anymore. So we're gonna delete them immediately, or at least remove them from the scene. And actually, trying to put these kind of these actually were lines and circles, and we converted them, as we've seen, into something that looks physical. And putting them in the right place is going to be a little bit challenging. And the change in radius, it's not going to be a big issue, but yeah, it is important. And we could have maintained the radius, but I think doing it this way is gonna add some interesting details, and is gonna make it look even better, even though we are not following the reference image as the desk fan looks like in the real life. Sometimes personalizing the thing that we're creating is gonna make it is gonna give it that personal touch that is gonna make it look even better. But we can always go back and change the radius if we want to, because it looks a little bit off-putting if you are looking for realism. And you don't have to worry about the exact values, because it may vary according to the scaling process that we have done previously. Okay, now I think the desk fan is taking the shape that we were looking for. Now we're gonna select everything here and push them to the back and try to do the same thing there, but we're gonna do some changes, and we're gonna move these circles a little bit in place where they should be. Scale them properly and push them in the right place. Okay, in the from now on, we're gonna try to work on some other important, more even more intricate and important details that we cannot see directly, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. So yeah, um, I hope you are following me so far because it is important to do so. And for now, we're gonna try to go and create more details. Go. Alright, now as we said before, we are gonna work on some more details here. And of course, we're gonna scale this in holding shift to create that extrusion right there. And after that, this is gonna be a starting point for some more details and the end of the engine that is gonna be located inside this cylinder that we have created previously. And of course, we are gonna start with something simple, as you can see here, with a simple cylinder. And this cylinder is gonna be a starting point as well for some pieces that are gonna, they're not gonna be highly visible, but we are gonna be able to see them through the cage of the fans. And of course, we're gonna create the fan itself, which is gonna come with other pieces, as you can see here. So given the thickness to this plane or cylindrical plane is gonna be a starting point as well for creating the fan itself, as we said. So it's gonna be composed of three pieces, and these three pieces are gonna be created individually, and we're gonna create one of them and we're gonna copy it over. So we're gonna divide this tube here into three parts. Okay, we are trying to make things narrower right there, even though it seems like we have a simple problem. Probably it's an alignment or restriction issue right there. So let's see. Okay. We're gonna select these three polygons right there, and we're gonna extrude them out. Maybe you're gonna go with two. Let's see. And after that, we're gonna try to bend and move and turn some of these vertices a little bit until we get the shape of the fin edge. We could have actually used the reference image or something that is gonna help us create the perfect shape. We're gonna try to do this quickly though. I have a problem in the viewport. It is related to some clipping issues, and don't get disturbed by it. And yeah, just follow and just focus on the modeling process. Of course, creating this shape in the beginning is gonna be a little bit disturbing and off-putting because it doesn't look quite right. But as we try to move these vertices in the right place, we're gonna start to add more lines and more edges to refine the curves, which is gonna give us more details. Okay, as you can see here, I'm trying to kind of put these vertices in the right place, and we will try to create something that looks real. That's why we are trying to rotate, scale in to make it a little bit sharper, and we're gonna rotate it a few degrees horizontally, just to make it look, because it is, this fan, it is twisted, that's why it pushes air forward. If it is not twisted, it's not gonna do that. So we're gonna try to rotate it few actually it is a vertical rotation, not horizontal. And of course, we're gonna fix some of these vertices later. Okay, fixing these manually is a good and it's the only option we have to fix them manually, actually, and try to make things easier for the turbo smooth modifier when we apply it. And because yeah, because the smoothie modifier is gonna interpret the curves that you have created and make them even smoother, so we don't have to worry about making everything perfectly smooth. You just give the smoothie modifier a starting point for the job it's gonna do. Okay, we're gonna close this gap right here, and using the bridge option right there. Even though the okay, this is a third, and we're gonna remove these 2/3 and keep 1/3 of it. And of course, we are gonna uh, recreate it in a way that is gonna be helping us to create the 2/3 that are gonna look similar to this one here that we have. The problem is we didn't center the pivot, so this might occur. And there is a problem as well, is that which is that the two ends are not extremely and perfectly similar. That's why we are seeing these weird results when these three parts meet each other. So now we're gonna attach everything together, and we're gonna convert it to poly and attach them together. And of course, we are gonna weld the vertices where they are gonna be intersecting. And of course, we're gonna do this manually. We could have used the array option, which is a lot better if we could actually change the pivot in the right place, in the very center of the fan. Alright, now it is time to weld these vertices. Alright, we have a problem right there because this should not be actually it does not have to be that way, so we're gonna bring it back. Doing it manually is probably a bad idea because it should be perfectly aligned with the surface it belongs to. Okay, now we are gonna try to create something else in this fan, especially in the front, because this hole shouldn't be there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna borrow this surface right there and keep on the shift to move it, even though there are some additional edges that we don't want to be there. Sometimes I do things that are not completely um, the default and the best thing to do. And you don't have to do what I am doing perfectly, and don't ever assume that what I'm doing is the perfect thing to do, and that I don't make mistakes. I sometimes make things, and when I'm looking back at them, I realize that I could have done them a lot more better, and I could have avoided mistakes that might seem trivial. So now we are trying to rotate the okay, there is a thing here, so we have to since we are trying to modify one of these fan blades, there is a necessity to modify the 2/3, the other two edges, or the two blades actually, because we are making an individual modification here, and this effect should spill over the two other blades. So we're gonna do the same process here, and yeah, which is trying to copy what we have done here to the other side, which I have done actually off screen because it is repetitive and it's gonna take a lot of time. Okay, as you can see here, I'm trying to create the piece that is gonna be covering this area right here. It is similar to the previous one, but um, it has some things that are different. Okay, try to put this piece in the right place and try to modify it as you see here, as you can see me doing. And I'm trying to add some intricate details right there, so using the chamfer modifier is a good thing to do. Okay, chamfering these edges is going to give us additional polygons that are going to be extruded to the outer side. So we're going to select them one by one individually, and we're going to extrude them out. Okay, good. Now we're gonna extrude a little bit, and yeah, using the bevel also works fine because we want the outer surface to be a little bit narrower. And now, as you can see here, we're trying to scale in and maybe weld these vertices together if this is what we want. And it is also usually a good option in order to avoid seeing some weird results when we are applying the Turbo Smooth modifier. And now there is this box that is going to be on top of this piece, which is not a big deal. We're going to create it in just a minute. And after we are done with this piece, we're gonna jump to doing some supporting edges, which is also a crucial part of the modeling process. Okay, this piece actually is not vertical, so we must have to, or we must rotate it 3 degrees and push it to the inside in order to fit what we can see on the real desk fan. So now let's jump and create some supporting edges. Alright, now it is time to work on some supporting edges, and this process, as we said before, is highly repetitive, so probably in this last part I'm not gonna talk too much because it is obvious what we are gonna do, and the same things are gonna be repeated over and over again. So we're gonna try to use some the chamfer tool sometimes, and sometimes we're gonna do this supporting edges manually by selecting the edges and creating doing the ring and connect process. And sometimes, as you can see here, the chamfer tool is gonna come handy. So we are gonna support the places where there are hard edges to tell 3ds Max that these areas right here need to hold and keep their solidity. And this might be time consuming for those who don't want to spend a lot of time. So yeah, you gotta do it in order to end up with something that is worthwhile. And now we're gonna try to weld these vertices in the center, and using the weld is gonna save us some of the some geometry and time, and it's gonna look better actually. And applying Turbo Smooth is gonna tell us exactly what the result is gonna look like once it is chamfered. Probably we don't need that edge in the center. Add two of them, push them apart, and do this in the areas where you believe the corners or the edges should hold and not be smooth. And after that, we're gonna jump to the other pieces and work on them one by one until we are finished. Some of these areas we don't really need to keep because they're not going to be seen. Some polygons we need to delete sometimes. So this one here, this area here needs to have that slight kind of it's gonna be a little circular cavity right there, and it's gonna be pushed inward in order to give it that effect that it is being cut into two halves or something like that. And it is a beautiful effect that that is essential in order to make it look like the original piece that we have in the reference image. Okay, this looks good so far, and yeah, it looks a lot better when we apply the Turbo Smooth to it. Okay, this piece, this big one here, is starting to take the shape that we want. But the thing that I don't like is the fact that it looks a little bit taller or bigger than it should be. So here we are trying to push back these elements in the right place. It seems like the cylinder or the main body of the which contains the engine disappeared, and here we are again. Sometimes this happens in 3ds Max, so if this happens to you, try to go to auto back and to go to the previous files that 3ds Max saves automatically, and you're gonna bring back your model. And yeah, if you don't do this and you neglect it for a certain period of time, these files are gonna be saved. New files are gonna be saved on the files that you need to restore, and probably your pieces are gonna be they're gonna disappear for forever. Probably you're gonna lose them. Okay, that looks awesome. All right, now there is um, we are here and trying to support some of the as you can see here, this is completely not looking as good as it should be. All right, so recreating this piece is probably a good idea if you want to. For time purposes, I'm not gonna do that. There are a lot of unnecessary edges and vertices in this piece here. So if you want to go ahead and weld some of these together, it's gonna be probably a good idea in order to clean up your mesh a little bit more. Okay, supporting the edges of these areas is going to be a little bit difficult because there is a variation in distance. Okay, there are some edges that are close together, and there are somewhere in some areas there are some additional space, and this is gonna um, push you, and it's gonna require manual work. Okay, now we are very close to the end of making the desk fan, and I hope you enjoyed this 1 hour plus video in which I explained to you and I've shown you every step of the process, and the video was a little bit sped up. I hope you could follow because it is really important that you did if you want to get the same results here. And yeah, I hope you learned something here and there, and I hope that was useful, and I wish you best of luck, and I will see you in the next part of this series. And yeah, take care, my friend.